everyone, and welcome to today's PDP event titled Navigating International Waters. Today, we have Lars Naslund with us from 3M, the true expert in international relationships and business transactions, and how do we navigate business overseas from here in America. So just to give you a little bit of background, Lars is a Swedish citizen and holds a bachelor's degree in accounting and auditing from the University of Östersund, Sweden, and a master's degree in general management from the Stockholm School of Economics. After experiences with a Swedish industrial distributor, a French multinational, and a media agency, Lars joined 3M's Sweden in December of 2000 as a finance and sourcing manager. And then in May of 2004, he moved to Brussels to lead the finance and sourcing operations in West Europe. Then a new position as country business leader for healthcare opened up and brought him back to Sweden in January of 2008. This position, which he held until December 2010, was later expanded to cover all of Finland. When the Nordic region, consisting of Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden, was formed in 2011, Lars became the regional finance manager and country manager for all of Sweden. Lars has since relocated to St. Paul, Minnesota, and is currently Vice President Global Commercial for 3M's Safety and Industrial Business Group. So we're very fortunate to have him here today with so much experience and so much wisdom to share. So Lars, I'm going to hand it off to you, but thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Amanda. And it's a pleasure to be here and talk about something that I'm really passionate about. So really the objective for this short session is to try to introduce to you all why culture matters, and maybe also give my personal perspective why I'm passionate about it. It's to cultivate some kind of cultural awareness, which is relevant for both business and non-business. So you need to know kind of the cultural pieces as you're traveling around the world, whether you're there for business or pleasure is always helpful. I'm not going to try to say that I will cover everything in this short session, but I do want to really just kind of scratch the surface on some key things. So I'll start with a brief introduction of why I feel passionate about this. Then I'll go into some general items with a wrap up, and I also we'll get some questions. So I'm just going to start now and kind of lead us through some of the cultural pieces that I have learned to navigate over the years, and well, roughly 25 years in different businesses. So first of all, let's just look at the definition of culture. According to the Oxford Dictionary, it's the way of life of a people, including their attitudes, values, beliefs, arts, sciences, modes of perceptions, and habits of thought and activity. Very long definition, but really it's the way of life of a people and attitudes and values. That really would summarize what this is about. You can be the best of the very best in your area of expertise, but you're going to face challenges when interacting with people from other countries or cultures, both on private travel and when doing business, if you don't listen or if you don't kind of think about the culture you're visiting or the culture you're working with. So by investing time in preparing yourself for the culture you visit, you're going to multiply your chances for a successful business outcome or a pleasant vacation with fewer negative surprises. And I think you've all heard horror stories from friends or family or even your personal experiences when things go really wrong, and it may be a cultural thing. So just going back to my own experience, so when I came out of my university with a bachelor's degree in finance, I spent 0 hours at college studying culture. There was some discussions about it, but we never really studied it. We did not talk about understanding cultural differences and how they can be leveraged, or also how they can change the outcome completely if we fail to think about them. So I've been able to use or kind of learn about cultures as I've been with 3M for almost 21 years, or previously in the French multinational, how things are different between countries. Having lived in a few countries has also helped me to understand. But I am absolutely not a cultural expert. I know a few people around the world can probably say they are, but I'm not one of them. But I would just give you a flavor where this is. So one of the first learnings I had when I was in the French multinational company was we were working then with France. Of course, that was a headquarter, but also in the Nordic region, so Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Norway. working in a setting where you're exposed to multiple countries, multiple languages, is really I would say a challenge initially until you understand what people really mean. One thing is what they say. Typically, we speak English, which is a foreign language for all of us, and it's also a language we may not fully master. So there's always a risk of confusion. But at the time, my HR manager gave me a book called When Cultures Collide. It was written by Richard D. Lewis, and he's I would say a cultural expert. This book fascinated me completely. It's stereotyping in a way different cultures around the world, but it's also very good to use as a kind of a dictionary when you go to a new country, when you meet people from a new culture you haven't interacted with. This book may actually guide you through some of the typical behaviors, typical manners of a new culture for you. It's not that you will have to understand and know everything in it, but if you just the mere fact that you read the book and look at or of similar there are similar books, it's just going to help you to understand the differences and maybe avoid some of the pitfalls or misunderstandings that create frustration potentially in the business world, can create the wrong outcome. You may lose a business, you may just run into severe problems that are not going to benefit you or your company. So maybe going back again then, as I'm from Sweden, small country, 10 million inhabitants, a language which is pretty much only spoken by the 10 million in the country. There are some minorities outside of Sweden speaking Swedish, but there is very minimal. So I had to learn foreign languages. I was fortunate enough to have parents who actually put me in a French immersion type school. So I had to learn French and of course also English. So French and English kind of became my second, third languages, depends on how you see it. And really interesting to see how languages open doors for you. So France, you may have heard or you may have been there and seen a lot of stereotypes about French being very protective and not wanting to speak English, which is partly true and partly untrue. But the thing is, it taught me that languages that's like a fast track into a new culture. I started to study German also in my high school. And then after graduating high school and then both in university after university, I've been able to study a few more languages like Dutch, recently here in the US, Spanish or Latino Spanish, and know some Italian and Finnish. So really, just by knowing a bit of a language is a major door opener or a fast track, as I said, into that culture. Now, nobody can learn all the languages in the world. So what you can do is to learn more about the cultures you kind of you will interact with. So that moves me into the general discussion. I wanted to just give you a couple of ideas of things to consider when you work or you're on vacation in a new country or a new culture. And one of my favorite expressions is actually from Peter Drucker. He says in one of his management books, culture eats strategy for breakfast. By that, he means that you can have all the right strategies. You may have spent millions with consultants on a corporate strategy. If you don't understand the culture that is needed to change or that you need to help change this, the strategy will never come to life. So that expression combined with the terminology or the meaning of culture, I said, the way of life of the people, including their attitudes, values, beliefs, modes of perceptions. That really is the essence of why understanding culture is important. So investing time and some money into understanding culture and basic language pitfalls has a very quick payback. There are too many examples where people or companies kind of go a bit lean or a bit mean. They don't spend the money to check feasibility of a product's name, or they just launch a product globally, and the name of that product may have a very bad meaning. It could be a foul word or simply a very, very bad thing to launch. I have multiple examples of where companies have completely failed to navigate the language piece, but also cultural pieces. So my favorite examples are probably when Chevrolet launched the car Nova in the US. And if you try to launch that in Spanish-speaking countries, it's not going to resonate very well. No va. It means that the car doesn't go. Not a great name for a car. Or in my home country, we have a large company making vacuum cleaners, amongst other things, called Electrolux. They were thinking about the vacuum cleaner sucking up the dust from the ground. So they launched a great expression, says, nothing sucks like Electrolux. Probably not the best thing to launch in the US. So again, if you understand the culture or the language, preferably both, you're gonna look at a much more successful outcome. While English is spoken as kind of a second language in the majority of the countries around the world, just because people speak English doesn't mean that they fully understand the nuances of English. So always, if you can, try to use local experts, local native speakers who are good at English, who can help you work with how that translates into the local language or what kind of English is appropriate for that market. Speak slowly, check in with the others frequently if they understand. So language, I say that was a fast track into a culture. It's an incredibly important part, but use local knowledge. Don't just assume that just because they speak English, they will understand everything. There are religious or cultural symbols, like symbolic. You can have superstition, like numbers. Number 13 in most countries is a number of unluck. If you look at elevators, rarely you see a number 13. At least in the past, planes didn't have a row 13. Now I see that change. If you go to China, you will not see the number 4 in an elevator. That's considered as an unlucky number. While the number 8 is an incredibly lucky number, and you will see the number 8 used in many ways. So not only language or habits, there are many other symbols of cultural differences or things to consider. Again, working with a local person who can tell you, and you have to make sure that there's an open climate for them to speak out or speak up. Sometimes people from certain cultures may not intervene or just don't want to be kind of challenging you just because that's part of their culture. Remember to always check in. Ask the questions. Is this okay to use in this country? Make sure you give enough time to listen to their input. Companies have made serious mistakes just by not listening or not appearing to listen. And listening means allowing time for silence. One of the other things is, which I'm not really doing today, but that's because it's virtual and I'm also trying to keep my body language down, because one of the risks with body language, and that's a cultural thing, if you go to continental Europe or Southern Europe, France, Italy, Spain, or you go to Latin America, you're more likely to see vivid body language, hands flying around, etc. If you go to the northern cultures, you're going to see more people sitting still and probably not even looking in your eyes when they speak. It's more of an introvert culture. Just thinking about the body language is important. In some cultures, if you have excessive body language, all the people that you talk to, all they're going to think about is your body language. They will not hear what you say. They will only concentrate on what you do or how you appear. As I said, while in other countries or cultures, having that excessive body language is normal, and it will resonate perfectly with the person you're talking to. So the body language, the distances when you speak, in some cultures you want to speak like 1 foot away, even if it's COVID, maybe not recommended, but the way they speak is extremely close. In other cultures, it could be 10 feet apart. There have been a lot of jokes coming from my home country that whenever COVID is over, people are going to be much more comfortable not having to be as close as 6 feet apart. And we can laugh at it, but in some of the Nordic cultures, standing 10, 15 feet apart is much more natural and comfortable for people. While if you go to India, you're standing basically foot to foot in many cases with the person you talk to. So body language, another important thing to consider. Learn what's common in the country or the culture you're visiting and adapt a bit. It's not about you fully giving up who you are in your own culture, but it's kind of learning about the pitfalls. I'm coming back to that later. Another thing I wanted to talk about is about organizations or society in general. Some cultures have a very, what I would call, flat or non-hierarchical structure. Again, you're probably going to look at northern part of the northern hemisphere, to some extent, maybe Australia, a couple of other countries, Anglo-Saxon countries, where the structure in the country, the organizations are more flat, the hierarchy is not as clear. However, if you move into certain Asian cultures, Japan, Korea, China, or parts of Latin America and Southern Europe, you will have a very strict hierarchy, really both respecting seniority, but also having seniority to guide the discussions. I have a diagram that you can see on the screen shortly that shows typically how meetings are started in different cultures. If you go to a meeting in Japan, it's going to be very clear who the most senior person in the room is. Both if it's in a business meeting, it could be if you're the seller and you have the buyer on the other side, the most senior person at the buyer will be the person who actually starts the meeting. You would have a number of minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes at the beginning of the meeting about chit-chatting and different things. But when the senior person decides that the meeting starts, the protocol is very clear. You start the meeting. In some other cultures, there is no chit-chat. You get straight into the meeting. Typically, that's in Germany or similar cultures. Or in very short introductions, you talk sports or you talk, well, I would avoid it, even if the chart would say that you would talk about scandals or politics in France. Politics is one of my, personal at least, I avoid politics at all price. I don't want to talk about politics because it's just, first of all, I'm normally not versed enough in the politics of the country I visit. Secondly, it's always sensitive. Just avoid politics. That's my view. But scandals in France with politicians involved are common and the favorite topic of anybody. So if you know about those, you can probably kind of join the conversation. The other part about meetings, this is something I've learned here in the US as well. And US is probably one of the American cultures where people tend to be on time. While in other cultures, being on time is kind of, it's not as important as when you join or when the meeting starts, you get into the topic. Being on time has very different meanings in different parts of the world. Being on time in Switzerland or in Germany means on time. Being on time I'm exaggerating and stereotyping a bit, but if you're being on time in Spain or Portugal, could be that you're 15 minutes late and you would still be considered to be on time. It's very annoying for those who are from a timely culture, but it's fully natural from those in a less timely culture. So I think this is the time aspect, the respecting each other in that case. Don't be too angry if you're in a meeting in Spain and it doesn't start on time. It may be very frustrating, but again, that's part of the culture. Is just understand it. You may not like it, but it's something you have to kind of live with. So in short, I mean, I just scratched the surface on a couple of things like body language, spoken language, hierarchies, etc., timeliness. These are just a few things about cultures. To me, the thing is about how to navigate in the different business landscapes around the world is really to understand the main differences in culture. It's not about you personally trying to change yourself and becoming like a local person from that culture. First of all, I don't think you will be able to do it very well. Secondly, shouldn't give up your own values. You need to understand what the biggest differences are, understand the pitfalls or the absolute no-nos of certain cultures, and just respect the culture. That would be the main thing. Your company or your culture will have you will automatically have some biases towards the culture you're visiting, and they will have some biases towards you. You can overcome most of that by being very open, listen, and adapt or agile in the discussion. Successful interaction of across cultures is often about toning down yourself to some extent, but as I said, don't give up your own values. Stay true to those, but also be very clear that you're trying to do your best to be and understand and be immersed in the culture you're visiting. It's about respect. I would also add another word which is critical personal attributes to anybody visiting other places is be humble. If you're in a developing country, you may think, well, I'm from the United States, it's the biggest economy in the world and we're super developed, and it's true. But the fact that the developing country may not have all the technological advances that you see in the United States, there are other things they have. Cheer those and kind of embrace those and show the audience that you respect those, and you are like how should I say, you're respectful, but you also honor them. That will help you. That will help them feel that you're not coming there to teach them or kind of put pressure or put them under a certain like a pressure, indirect pressure. Just think about how you can navigate, or how you can help show what's good from your culture and how to bring that into their culture. Regardless of how much you prepare culture-wise, you can read the book I talk about. You can read online about a certain culture. Things are still going to happen. Things may not fall out at all as you planned. Just stay calm, stay humble, ask questions. If you feel that you don't really understand something, if they speak English and it's not perfect, if you, instead of misunderstanding and walking away with a very bad feeling about the meeting, ask a question, slow down and ask them to be clarified. This is a thing that I've seen many, many times. People don't want to ask questions. They don't want to ask for a clarification. They just walk out there with probably a misunderstanding and walk out of the meeting very unhappy. In my 20 years or 21 years with 3M, one of the absolute best perks of my job is working across cultures. I can only advise you all to hopefully at one point in your life work for a company, a large company. It doesn't have to be a large company. It can be a small company still, but a company that works across cultures. In the United States, which is interesting as a foreigner, I can say that as well. The United States has many cultures. It's not one country. It's so many countries in a way. The country is built on many immigrants the past 200-300 years. It's a blend of multiple. It's a cosmopolitan melting pot. It's a fantastic country to learn about different cultures, yet those cultures are gradually influenced by some kind of commonality, common American culture. As you travel around the world or work in a multinational companies, just get immersed. It's so gives you so much. You don't even have to travel to a country to get immersed into their culture. You can meet people from that country who will help you become more aware of it. So I would just say I can only recommend working in a place where you meet, interact with, and learn about other cultures. That summarizes my opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Lars. That was some great advice. And I loved your personal stories from the car, the Nova in Spanish, or Nova, and then the nothing sucks like the Electrolux. That one got a laugh out of me. So thank you for just the experience that you've shared and the wisdom for how students can become culturally aware, hopefully before we go overseas with our careers. So the first student with a question is Kelsey Bima. She's a current junior in the business school. And so take it away, Kelsey, ask your question.
Hi, thanks, Amanda. I would be curious to hear, for students who are desiring to take their career overseas, what are some things that they can start doing today or start doing now in their college journey to prepare for when there's verbal connotation differences or behavioral differences or difference in expectations when they go overseas?
I would certainly go online. And there's so much material online from different authors and different studies. Look at what the major differences are. And as I said, in the United States, even between the states here, I mean, I live in Minnesota now since 4 years, and there is a Minnesota nice culture, which my friends in New York say is completely different than the New York culture. So I think it's really thinking about studying the country you go to a bit, meaning that there's always going to be a religion part. If it's a strong religious country, to understand I mean, for example, in Muslim countries, they work, they're off Fridays and Saturdays, and Sunday is a regular working day. So just learn about those days. You don't schedule meetings on a Friday. Well, you might, but nobody's going to be there. I would go online. I would also, I'm not paid for kind of promoting this book I talked about, When Cultures Collide, but I do think it's a good dictionary. You can look at the country you're going to and what are the biggest differences? How do they reason in meetings? How do they make decisions? Is it a hierarchical culture or is it a flat culture? I think those are just a couple main themes. But as I said, don't try to become like fully immersed into that culture. Just try to understand the main differences. And as I said, I would absolutely advise you to try to get, if it's an internship or at one point in your career, work abroad. I've worked abroad 3 times. I've lived abroad twice, but I worked also in France for a while. It's immensely rewarding. And maybe I should say one more thing I didn't mention. One of my first managers in 3M, who was a British guy, he joined 3M and he moved outside his home country, the United Kingdom or England, after 1 year in the company. He spent 40 years before retiring. He never came back to his home country, spent his whole career outside. And he said, one of the things he said to me when I moved to Belgium was, don't think about what you miss from your home country. Think about what you get in the new country. So you will find things very annoying in the new country. That's just the way it is. It's natural. It's nothing bad. Just think about the things you do like about the new country. That would be my advice. And then it's going to be a lot better.
That's great advice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks again, Lars. I love that advice. Don't think about what you're missing in your old country or what annoys you about the new, but think about what you get in the new. That's such a perspective shift. I love that. Our second student today is Matt Oshel, also a junior in our business school. And he has a question he would also like to ask about international business and what we can do as students.
Hi, Lars. In your experience, what has been the largest learning curve in understanding different cultures and how businesses operate in various regions of the world?
Wow, that's $1 million question. There are multiple learnings. I'll try to pick a few. So talking about hierarchies in different cultures and different businesses, my first international job and working a lot in France in a French company, but also working in my home country in Sweden for the French company. Even if I had been to a French immersion school, since I was there from basically K to 12, we didn't learn really the French culture as such. We learned a lot of French things like food or all those things, but we didn't really learn what it is like to work in a French company or the hierarchy piece. I wish I had learned more about how those structures work. That, for example, in one real life example, I was a bit annoyed with a person in the headquarters in France. So I decided to go directly to their boss and tell them, hey, this person is not respecting what I'm saying or is not listening to me. And that was a shock to everybody. The way so I directly approached their boss, the person's boss, instead of going to my boss to tell my boss that, can you talk to that person's boss and tell him or her that the individual further down in the organization needs to listen to me. I mean, to me, this was just a waste of time. I went directly. And I can tell you one of the things that it didn't resonate very well. In the end, the outcome was pretty much what I hoped for, but it made my boss very uncomfortable. I had a French boss, by the way, so I just have to say that. It made my boss uncomfortable because I had stepped where I kind of bypassed him. And it made the individual very unhappy because I went straight to their boss. So their view of me was very poor for a while until I apologized and said that I didn't understand the cultural piece. I think you need to learn. There's a culture of the country. There's a culture of the company, which may be strongly influenced by the headquarter country of the company. In a multinational, in a French multinational, you can assume that at the headquarter, even if there are many non-French people working there, it's going to be more of a French culture. As in 3M, there are many non-American people working at the headquarters, but the culture is probably not even American, it's Midwest culture. You need to understand a bit of the nuances, and that's going to just help you massively as you navigate the company. Apart from that, I mean, there are, I come back to a bit what I also said in my presentation. Be humble, stay true to your values, but be humble and listen. If you look at the, I'm going to talk again about culture stereotypes. In some cultures, silence is really not a bad thing. You can have in Japanese or Finnish cultures, which are more called introvert. They're not necessarily introvert, but there is a stronger belief in listening and reflecting. So if you hear someone talk to you, it's absolutely okay to be quiet for 2, 3, 4 seconds. If that happens in a US business discussion, and if someone is quiet for more than half a second, I think everybody in the room are going to be nervous. So learn about those cultures which have a more reflecting part, where they actually, it's okay to be quiet for a while. It's reflection. It's actually deemed as a strength. If you're quiet for a while, or the other part is quiet, it means that they're listening, they're synthesizing, they're understanding what you just said. So these are a couple of things I would always encourage people to do. And I think especially for North Americans, the fact that it's the listening part which becomes critical as a general guideline. I think that's a very standardized answer, I guess, but it's proven to me learning. I did not listen at all times. I was just going on and on and on. And I missed a lot. And I didn't necessarily get my message through because people were just trying to understand what I said 10 seconds ago or a minute ago. And I was just continuing. And in the end, I would get a nod. And the nod doesn't mean that they agree with me. The nod just means that they heard what I said. That's also something you might see in some of the East European cultures or Asian cultures. People nodding doesn't mean that they agree. It means that they heard what you said. Sometimes it doesn't even mean that they understand what you said, but they heard what you said. So listen to what you hear and ask questions, ask checking questions. That's key advice.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think that's just a great lesson to always keep in the back of our heads, is just keep listening to those
Keep
around.
listening. It's hard, especially when you graduate and you think you know everything, right?
Right.
No, I mean, I had been in a non-global company or non-multinational company for 3 years before I joined my first multinational. I gained the work experience, but I didn't gain any kind of cultural experience. So even if I was relatively good on what I was doing professionally, when I came into the French multinational, speaking French fluently, writing French fluently, I didn't really know the French culture, the business culture. And that was a steep learning curve. I had a steep learning curve on that one. Major number of mistakes and stuff. So very interesting.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you answering my question today.
You're welcome.
Lars, I also just want to point out how unique it is that you were in a French immersion school that your parents sent you to. And I think that's a really positive uniqueness in your story that's also led to where you are today.
Yeah.
I took a brief gap year overseas, and all the kids that I lived with were being taught Spanish alongside English. I mean, obviously English was their native language, but as they grew in age, their parents would also speak Spanish to them. And I just thought, what a gift to be able to be fluent in multiple languages by the time you hit high school or college.
Yeah, no, I think that's, I mean, my kids are fully fluent in English, but they also studied French and German. I think it's just, I have many friends where the parents are from 2 different countries and living in a 3rd country. So the kids they grow up with 3 languages and they're fluent in all 3. And I think that's a gift that you can't overestimate the value of it.
I agree. I think that's kind of a dying art too, but something I would like to implement with my own kids one day, hopefully overseas. So I appreciate your just thoughtfulness and being here with us today and sharing your experiences and all that you've learned. And students, I just want to encourage you to reach out to Lars on LinkedIn if you feel inclined or if you have more questions. I know I certainly do and took lots of good notes. Students, thank you all for attending today. I really appreciate it. And don't forget to go click the link for the survey after our event is over. Thank you all.